right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a huge topic, the constant tug of war between education as a right and the powerful forces of money that are reshaping our schools. And trust me, this isn't just some abstract idea. It affects all of us every single day. So let's dive right in. You know, everything we're about to talk about really boils down to this one single question. How you answer it changes everything. Is education something everyone is entitled to, like a basic human right? Or is it a product, a service that you shop for and buy in a marketplace? Just keep that in the back of your mind as we go. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll look at the two big competing ideas. Then we'll dive deep into each one. After that, we'll see how global forces are shaking things up, look at the real-world school choices people face, and finally, try to figure out where the right balance might be. Okay, let's kick things off with the main event. And this is way more than just a dry policy debate. You can honestly think of it as a battle for the very soul of education itself. So on one side, you have this idea that education is a public good. Think of it like a public square, a place that's essential for democracy to work, where the government has a huge responsibility to make sure everyone has access. And on the other side, a view that sees education as a marketplace, an economic product where things like competition and privatization are what really matter. I mean, we're talking about two completely different worlds here. So let's really unpack that first idea, right? This concept of education being a public good, this shared public square for all of us. So what does public good even mean? Well, it's any service that a society decides is so fundamentally important that everyone should have access to it, period. It's all about fairness and access for all, no matter how much money you have. Like public parks or clean water. And this philosophy says education absolutely belongs in that category. And if you go with that, the implications are huge. It means the government's job is massive. It's not just about building a few schools. It's about pouring money into the system, making sure every single kid has a fair shot, and actively working to shrink the gap between the rich and the poor. The whole point is to use education to build a stronger, smarter, more democratic country for everyone. But then, a different idea started gaining some serious steam, especially over the last few decades. It's a way of looking at education through a much more economic lens. As the world got more competitive, the pressure for efficiency was on, and schools were definitely not immune. Now, to get this mindset, you have to understand this one term, human capital. It's basically a fancy way of saying that your skills, your knowledge, all that stuff in your head are an investment. In this model, you're not just a person, you're an economic asset. And education, that's the main way you increase your own market value. The logic is actually pretty simple when you break it down. 1, you invest your time and money to get an education. 2, that education gives you skills, which makes you a more valuable employee. And 3, the payoff is a bigger salary down the road. It's basically a cost-benefit analysis for your own life. This quote just nails the whole shift in thinking, doesn't it? The entire relationship gets redefined. A school stops being a public square for making good citizens, and it becomes a marketplace. Students are now consumers, shopping for the best deal, and teachers become, they're the providers of that service. Now, this big shift isn't just happening in a bubble. These economic ideas are getting supercharged by what's happening on a global scale, and it's changing classrooms literally everywhere. Think about it. Globalization turns education into this high-stakes race between countries. That leads to a massive push for standardized tests so we can all see how we stack up. Curriculums start focusing on things like science and tech, STEM, because that's what's seen as economically useful. Digital learning explodes, and maybe not so surprisingly, you see more and more privatization of schools and colleges. Okay, so let's bring all this high-level theory down to earth for a second. How does this whole battle of ideas actually play out when it comes time for a family to choose a school? So this pretty much breaks down the 3 main options you see out there. You've got your government schools, which are totally state-funded and either free or very cheap. Then you have this interesting hybrid, the government-aided schools. They're run privately but get public money. And finally, you've got private schools, which pay their own way and, can cost a lot. But what's really fascinating are the trade-offs. With government schools, the big challenge is often just basic quality and resources. With private schools, the worry is that they become too much like a business and make inequality worse. And that middle group? They're in a constant tug of war between running their school their way and being accountable to the public that funds them. So, this all leads us to the final, and maybe the most important question of all. With all these competing forces, what's the right way to go? Where do we possibly find the right balance?
Now, to be fair, the marketplace model isn't all bad. The people who support it will tell you that competition creates more schools, which gives families more choices. It can also spark innovation, and often leads to schools with way better buildings and technology. And you know what? They're not wrong about that.
But, and this is a really big but, the downsides are huge. This approach almost always makes education more expensive, which can totally shut out poor and marginalized families. And when making a profit is goal number one, you have to wonder if educational quality takes a back seat. At the end of the day, it can create a two-tiered system, one for the rich and one for everybody else. And that gets us to what might be the fatal flaw in all this. Education is a social good. We all benefit from having a well-educated society. It makes our communities better, our economies stronger. A pure market model just isn't built to see that. Its logic doesn't have a place for really important ideas like fairness and social justice. So we end up right back where we started, but with a bit of a twist. The question isn't just whether school is a right or a product. It's about realizing that when you put a price tag on education, the cost is so much more than just money. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is this: as a society, what are we truly willing to pay?